Today, in episode 87, we are digging into a really incredible story thanks to the research of Mr. Zahir Ahmad Mir in his book, True CourtRoom Stories. We're going to explore a conflict that is absolutely timeless, a fundamental clash between expertise and power. And our story kicks off with a decision that was, quite literally, a matter of life and death. Just imagine for a second you're a physician, and you have to deliver that message. Not to a patient's family in a quiet room, but to military leaders, to political advisors, all of them chomping at the bit, ready for a major battle. It is a direct, no-nonsense warning based on your scientific and medical knowledge. A man's life is on the line, and possibly the outcome of a war. Talk about pressure. So, where are we? The setting for our story is 14th century Granada. Now, this was a vibrant, incredible place, a real center for culture, for science, for knowledge. But it was also a place under constant threat, always dealing with intense political maneuvering and military pressures. It's the kind of place where every single decision, especially one about war, gets put under a microscope. And the patient here, he wasn't just some random soldier. No, this was a high-ranking Muslim general, a key strategic leader, somebody absolutely essential to Granada's army. So you see, his health wasn't just a personal issue, it was a matter of state security. The doctor's professional opinion had a direct and massive impact on the entire kingdom's defense strategy. And right here, this is where the whole story just takes a wild turn. You would think the physician's advice, which was meant to save a crucial leader, would be met with some level of understanding, right? Wrong. Instead, it gets twisted into something dark and sinister, an accusation of sabotage. The political advisors didn't see a doctor trying to save a patient, they saw a traitor trying to undermine the war effort. And that is where our real story begins. Okay, so let's really get into the weeds here. This wasn't just a simple disagreement that people could argue about and then move on. Oh no, this blew up into a full-blown legal battle. It became a court case that put science and medical integrity on one side and the crushing weight of political ambition on the other. A medical diagnosis was literally on trial as a crime against the state. And the cast of characters in this real-life drama is just fascinating. First, you have a renowned Jewish physician, a man whose expertise was so great that his religion didn't matter. He was the best. Then you have the sick Muslim general, the man at the very center of this storm. Pitted against the doctor are these suspicious political advisors, the ones who see conspiracy in every shadow. And finally, you have the judge, the one person who has to listen to all of this and make a decision that could set a massive precedent. What I love about this is how it breaks down the conflict so clearly. It's like two different languages being spoken. On one side, you have the physician. His argument is built on medical science, on observation, on facts. His goal? Simple: save a human life. On the other side, you have the advisors. Their entire case is built on suspicion, on political paranoia. Their goal? Win a battle, no matter the cost. One side is about caution, the other is about winning. Now, what's so important to understand is that this wasn't decided with swords or by some secret political maneuver. This whole explosive situation was brought into a court of law. And after the judge heard both sides, the science from the doctor and the accusations from the advisors, he made a truly historic decision. He sided with the physician. He acquitted him of everything. That verdict sent a shockwave, a powerful message that, in his court, objective fact mattered more than political convenience. So the case in Granada gave us one answer. It was a huge win for the idea that the law should protect expertise. But that was just one trial, one judge, one moment in time. The fundamental question, well, it didn't just vanish. It would bubble up again and again throughout history in different places, forcing every generation to face the exact same problem. Now, let's jump forward in time, because if you think this was just some dusty old story from medieval Spain, you're in for a surprise. Fast forward about 600 years, and we see the exact same conflict, science versus power, playing out in a totally different part of the world in a totally different way. This timeline just lays it out so perfectly, doesn't it? In 14th century Granada, it was a court weighing medical truth against political pressure. Jump to 1925 America, and it's a court weighing scientific theory against overwhelming social pressure. The specifics are different, but the core battle, it's identical. And this case was the legendary Scopes monkey trial. This became a massive media sensation. A young teacher, John T. Scopes, found himself arrested just for doing his job, teaching the established science of evolution from a textbook. He wasn't accused of lying or making things up. Nope, his crime was teaching a scientific truth that clashed with the strongly held religious beliefs of the community. When you break it down like this, it's just crystal clear. The person on trial is an expert, a doctor in one century, a teacher in another. And what's their so-called crime? It's just sticking to the facts of their field, whether it's medicine or biology. And the conflict is always, always science versus some other powerful force. Sometimes it's political, other times it's social. It's the same script, just with different actors. All right, so after seeing this pattern repeat itself over centuries, you have to ask, have we figured out a better way to handle this today? Have our legal systems evolved to answer that question from the Granada courtroom? Well, the good news is, yes. Modern law has actually tried to create a kind of legal shield specifically to protect experts in these situations. And that shield has a name: academic freedom. It's a hugely important concept. Basically, it says that scholars, scientists, teachers, and other experts have to be free to research and teach what the evidence shows, without being shut down by politicians or institutions just because they don't like the conclusions. This is the modern legal evolution of the very argument that physician in Granada was forced to make to save his own life. And I want to be really clear, this is not just some niche Western idea. The principle of protecting expert knowledge and academic integrity is now a cornerstone of modern law all over the world. Just as the source material for this explainer highlights, it's a critical part of the legal systems in places from the United States all the way to Pakistan. It's a recognition of a universal truth. So let's tie all of this together. Because this journey from Granada to the modern day isn't just a history lesson. Far from it. Understanding this long-running war between fact and ideology is absolutely critical to understanding the challenges that we are facing in our world, right here, right now. You can really see the progression, the storyline across the centuries. It all starts with the Granada case, which bravely posed the core question, what wins, truth or power? Then the Scopes trial took that same conflict and broadcast it to the whole world, turning it into a massive public spectacle. And now you have modern law, with principles like academic freedom, trying to build a permanent protective solution. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. Again and again, it's the courtroom that becomes the final arena. It's the place where we, as a society, are forced to make a choice. What do we value more? The hard, sometimes uncomfortable truths that experts uncover, or the easy, comforting stories that fit our preferred ideology? And that leads us to the big final question, the one that's for us to answer. Because this battle, the one that started in a courtroom in Granada all those centuries ago, it's still going on. It's in our news headlines, it's in our social media feeds, it's in our public debates. When today's experts are put on trial for their public health advice, their climate science, their historical research, the question is, what verdict will... You know, in our world, there are really two powerful arenas where we go looking for the truth. You've got the scientific lab, and you've got the legal courtroom. But what happens when those two worlds smash into each other? What happens when a scientist's research gets put on trial, or when the law tries to tell science what's a fact? Well, today, that's exactly the conflict we're diving into. Now, this powerful line, it wasn't said in some university lecture. It was delivered by a judge from the bench. And as we learn from the book True CourtRoom Stories, which was researched by Zahir Ahmed Mir, this single sentence actually became the foundation of a huge case about medical expert testimony. And it just makes you wonder, right? What on earth could happen to make a court issue such a profound, definitive statement on what truth even is? So, that one quote, it wasn't just a throwaway line. It became the bedrock for a judgment built on 4 absolutely crucial principles. Think of them like 4 pillars, designed specifically to protect scientific integrity right there, inside the justice system itself. And these weren't just friendly suggestions. These were binding rulings. Okay, so these 4 rulings basically act as essential guardrails. First up, you simply cannot punish scientific truth no matter how inconvenient or unpopular it might be. Second, it affirms that a doctor's first duty is to people, to humanity, not to politics. Third, it guarantees that experts have to be able to speak freely without being afraid of backlash. And finally, number 4, courts are forbidden from turning honest professional advice into a crime. You put them all together and they create this powerful shield for truth when it's on trial. But, you know, this whole struggle, this fight to keep science safe from legal or political meddling, it's not new, not by a long shot. In fact, to really get the importance of these modern rulings, we've got to go back in time. We need to look back almost a century to one of the most famous courtroom showdowns in American history, a case that literally puts science itself in the defendant's chair. The year is 1925. The place? A sweltering, packed courtroom in Dayton, Tennessee. And boy, was the stage set for a trial that would grab the entire nation's attention. It pitted two of the greatest lawyers of the time, Clarence Darrow for the defense and William Jennings Bryan for the prosecution, against each other in an epic battle over science, faith, and freedom. So what was the big crime? It sounds almost ridiculously simple today. A high school teacher, a guy named John T. Scopes, was accused of breaking a brand new state law in Tennessee. That law, the Butler Act, made it illegal for any state-funded school to teach human evolution. That's it. He was put on trial for teaching a basic foundational concept of modern biology. And this one case just exploded into this huge national spectacle. It raised these fundamental questions that, honestly, we are still arguing about today. It stopped being about just one teacher and became this massive debate about the role of science, the role of religion, and the role of government in deciding what we learn and what we're even allowed to know. When you boil it down, the trial forced the entire country to talk about three core conflicts. You had scientific freedom versus religious belief. You had the state meddling in the classroom versus academic independence. And you had the intellectual freedom of teachers and students versus government control. These were the huge ideas on the line. And this is where it all clicks together. This is where the past and the present connect so clearly. On one hand, you have the Scopes trial, which was all about fighting the state to protect a teacher's freedom to teach. And on the other, you have this modern ruling, which says experts have to be free to speak scientific truth without being punished. It is the exact same fundamental fight for truth, just separated by nearly 100 years. But here's the crazy twist in the story. John Scopes, he was found guilty. He lost the case and was fined $100. But, and this is a huge but, in the court of public opinion and over the long haul of history, the trial was a massive turning point. It basically exposed the whole idea of legislating science to public ridicule. And in the end, it laid the groundwork for future laws protecting science in our schools. So a loss in the courtroom turned into a huge long-term victory for science. So, okay, why should we care about some judge's ruling in a trial from 1925 right now? Well, because we live in an age of constant information and a whole lot of misinformation. And the courtroom is often the last line of defense for figuring out what is actually a fact. The principles that were forged in these battles, they are more critical for us today than ever before. And that brings us right back to where we started, to this quote. This is the anchor for this whole story. It's the simple, powerful idea that connects the Scopes trial to every single modern courtroom where an expert has to take the stand. The idea is this: when science speaks, it's giving testimony. And to silence that testimony, whether it's through fear or politics or punishment, that's not just a bad move. It is an injustice. All of this leaves us with a really tough, really crucial question for our time. As the lines get blurrier and blurrier between opinion, fact, and outright falsehoods, the integrity of our courts, of our whole system, is everything. So who do we trust to be the gatekeepers of truth inside the courtroom? The answer to that is going to define the very nature. Hello and welcome. Today we're jumping into a really fascinating topic, drawn from the research in Mr. Zahir Ahmed Mir's book, True CourtRoom Stories. We're going to explore how a nation's highest courts can, and in this case did, become the ultimate protectors of knowledge and intellectual freedom. So let's kick things off with a big question, one that really sits at the heart of this entire discussion. In the search for truth, when ideas are put on trial, who is the final guardian? Who gets the last say? It's a powerful thought, so let's keep that in the back of our minds as we go through this. Now, where are we getting all this from? Our guide for this whole explainer is the incredible research laid out right here in Mr. Zahir Ahmed Mir's book. Everything we're about to cover comes directly from his work, giving us a front row seat to these major legal showdowns over intellectual liberty. All right, so let's get to the core of it. What Mr. Mir's research shows is this really consistent and, frankly, powerful pattern. It turns out that Pakistan's highest courts, we're talking the Lahore High Court and the Supreme Court, have time and again stepped up to act as a shield for academic and intellectual freedom. So what does that defense actually look like? Well, it boils down to three core principles that the courts have stood by. First, they've said that universities have a basic duty to protect free inquiry. Second, and this is a huge deal, the state is not allowed to punish someone for the conclusions they reach through their research. And third, the courts see this freedom not as some kind of threat, but as something that actually makes society stronger. Of course, these principles weren't just declared in some ivory tower. They were hammered out in real-world court battles. We're talking about cases dealing with censorship in school curriculums, challenges to academic papers, and even intense debates over scientific expression. This is where the rubber really met the road, you know? This brings us to the obvious next question. Why? Why did the courts keep landing on the side of intellectual freedom? To get that, we have to look deeper than just the final verdicts. We need to dig into the legal reasoning that was driving these decisions. We have to find the court's core belief. And in the legal world, there's a fantastic term for this, ratio decidendi. It's Latin, and it literally just means the reason for the decision. It's not about who won or lost. It's the central pillar of logic that the entire judgment is built on. And in these cases, the ratio decidendi is incredibly revealing. And there it is. This one sentence is the ratio decidendi that Mr. Muir's research pinpoints. Courts must safeguard scientific truth from political interference. Think about that. The courts saw their job not just as interpreting laws, but as actively protecting the search for truth itself, especially from the constantly changing winds of politics. Now, this string of rulings wasn't just a coincidence. The research suggests this was a very deliberate evolution. The Pakistani courts were consciously moving toward what's called Granada's tradition. That's a nod to a time in history when places like Granada were incredible centers of intellectual and scientific discovery, a tradition where knowledge and debate were not just tolerated but celebrated. Okay, so let's zoom out. What's the big takeaway from all of this? Beyond all the legal details of Pakistan's courts, Mr. Muir's work pulls out a single powerful moral lesson. And it's a lesson that really applies to any society anywhere in the world. This is it. A nation that fears knowledge becomes a prisoner of ignorance. This is the ultimate warning that comes out of the research. The second a society decides that certain questions are too scared to ask or some ideas are too dangerous to explore, it effectively builds its own prison. And what the courts were doing with these rulings was trying to tear down the bars. And that leaves us with one final, powerful question to think about. What really happens when a society's highest court takes a stand to defend not just laws, but knowledge itself? What does that mean for progress, for culture, for truth? That's the challenge that the research in True Courtroom Stories leaves us with. Thanks so much for tuning in.